Paulogia, and another edition of Ham and Egg News. If this is your first time here, and you're interested in the intersection of science and religion, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you know when research videos are posted. But that's not today. Today, we're once again going to react to Ken Ham reacting to things.
Welcome to Answers News. This is April 24th, 2017, and we got a full house for you here today. We got Ken Ham, Dr. Georgia Purdom, myself, Bodie Hodge.
Take it away.
All right, let's get started. This came from phys.org. Researcher proposes answer for why cave animals go blind.
It's an amazing answer. The ones that are cited, they simply leave the cave.
Yeah, if they can see, they swim out of the cave, and all you're left with are the blind ones.
But they use the word evolution.
Yeah, and it's not evolution at all.
Yeah, evolving, you think of going upward, moving in a direction. You know, it implies directionality.
That is why you fail.
It is telling that to sustain doubt about evolution among their listeners, AiG has to perpetuate false and inaccurate perceptions of what it is. Biological evolution is merely the change in allele frequencies in a population over time. These changes tend to occur due to natural selection, but environmental changes tend to be a driver of what is selected for and what is not. When a new deadly virus springs up, creatures immune to the disease tend to have more offspring, and therefore the frequency of the genes for that immunity will increase. That says nothing about directionality, or gaining, or losing. If you're talking about evolution, you should at least understand what it is, if only for the purpose of debunking it. But Georgia doesn't want her viewers to understand.
So is this reverse evolution then? Reverse evolution?
That's right. If anything, they've lost information.
First, information is another one of those terms AiG uses to continue to keep their listeners from understanding genetics. Mutations can cause some biological traits to not manifest, even though the gene sequences for those traits remain, which is what I think Georgia means by information. There's a phenomenon called atavism, where mutations in individuals allow ancestral traits to manifest, demonstrating that the genetic code must remain. This can result in chickens with teeth, humans with tails, and hind legs on snakes or whales. Wait, does that rhyme? That sounded like Dr. Zeus. You won't hear AiG talk about this, though, because it's an obvious marker for macroevolution and not special creation.
But they've lost it, but then in some ways, they don't need it in that environment. They don't need to see, and sometimes it enhances other abilities.
But here's a good example.
It's statements like this that make me occasionally suspect that Georgia actually understands and is just playing a role. This is exactly right. Fish in a dark cave don't need sight, so sight won't be selected for as often as, say, exceptional hearing or smell.
So,
people are equivocating on natural selection and evolution, which are two entirely different things. And I think,
it's...
Again, attempting to put up pretend barriers between things they can't deny and things they can't accept. I suppose this is true in the same way that putting one foot in front of the other isn't walking. But if you keep putting your feet forward like that, you're going to end up walking.
And I think, it's probably a multitude of things. It's not just the sight at one's leave. It depends on how easy it is to get in and out of the cave, but...
Again with those coherent ideas, Georgia. Deep down, you get this stuff, don't you?
You have to do a whole research study to figure that out?
A research study.
Maybe it's just my Christian past, but I've snickered at my fair share of studies that concluded something seemingly obvious or trivial. I sometimes cringe at the thought that my tax dollars might have been involved. But that said, I now recognize and understand that common sense is not knowledge, and that assumptions are not a firm basis for building useful models. I'm sure people had a good giggle when scientists were dropping rocks and feathers out of buildings to see which landed first. But we now know that bowling balls and feathers fall at exactly the same rate in a vacuum. That's counterintuitive and probably something you wish that NASA hadn't bothered with. It's this anti-research attitude that is most dangerous from the religious right, and it is being reflected in political decisions in North America far too often.
All right, this next one comes from Science News. Early dinosaur relatives sported odd mix of bird, crocodile-like traits.
Oh my goodness, Kirk Cameron was right.
We don't find one of these. A crocoduck.
All right. Well, this is a dinosaur. It's clearly a dinosaur, and they're wanting to put this on a split to split off, into birds,
crocodiles and birds,
and birds and dinosaur, all this kind of stuff.
I'm going to take this opportunity to play this clip from Logick's most recent video, partially because it's relevant, and partially because I'm so excited these continue this Hovind series. There's a link in the description to subscribe if you haven't already, and that means you're weird.
Kent. You're holding a toy sauropod, and you just showed a stupid picture of people trying to push a sauropod off a cliff. But you and I both know full well that nobody's proposing that birds evolved from fucking sauropods! Do those fossils I just showed you look anything like a goddamn brachiosaurus? I picked a great place to stop in the last video because it meant I got to start out with not only one of the most ridiculous claims in your entire speech, but also one of the most obviously dishonest. I mean, this is clearly not a case of you being dumb or deluded. This is you being deliberately deceptive. You've carefully and purposely chosen the least bird-like dinosaur you can think of so your ignorant audience will find it more ridiculous.
You know, one of the things that surprised me is they found this in the Middle Triassic. So if it's in the Middle Triassic, you know, dinosaurs were already around at that time.
Yeah.
Crocodiles were already around at that time.
And birds.
Yeah, you know.
Did you see that little scowl there by Bodie as he had to be the good employee and son-in-law and agree with Ken's completely incorrect statement? Of course, Bodie's correct that there were dinosaurs in the Triassic, but Ken is completely wrong that there are any signs of birds that far back, and Bodie bites his tongue. The earliest bird fossils came from late Jurassic period, a good 90 million years after the fossils in this article. Bodie obviously knows this, but knows better than to correct Ken. But it doesn't matter. Bodie's ridiculous point is just another version of, if we evolved from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? Bodie, your own Answers in Genesis website says to stop using the why are there still monkeys argument. My grandmother is my ancestor, yet for a while we were alive at the same time. It's not hard to understand.
See, what's interesting is, whenever they find what they call a dinosaur, they try to make out it looks like a bird. And then when they find birds, they try to make out they're dinosaurs. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
How is that remotely interesting? Or circular? Or what are you implying there? I'm not really sure. Pointing out commonalities in things is bad or anti-God? I don't get it.
Somebody got 4 of your DVDs today. I think that's what they're saying.
Awesome.
Georgia has DVDs? Something to add to my list for when the Is Genesis history and the entire life's work of Eric Hovind is complete.
Hope you enjoy them.
Wow.
So now the next article is about, this is about a bird or it's about a dinosaur. This is interesting.
This one comes from ABC. Funny. Yeah, dinosaur bird fossil.
It says, starts off, this is the first fossil of a dinosaur-bird. Okay.
So it calls it a dinosaur bird.
So what is it?
So they're saying it was...
They just keep switching the terminology.
Yeah.
They just keep switching the terminology.
It's just a bird.
When the bird species was confirmed, Mr. Darcy said he was thrilled to be able to say he discovered a dinosaur.
See, it's the equivocation. They're equating birds with dinosaurs.
But it just shows you they're trying to use those terms interchangeably.
Yeah.
Young Earth creationists are absolutely the experts on trying to blur terms. If they're not using evolution to cover non-biological elements of science, or the impossible to pin down kinds of animals, and most frequently from these guys, watering down the definition of religion, so that they can pretend that the lack of religious beliefs is somehow a religion. You've heard the analogies, like not collecting stamps is a hobby, or being bald is a hairstyle. Okay, Ken, just keep repeating these things over and over, and they will somehow become true.
There's a modern-day bird today. It lives down in South America called a Haitson. It actually looks like a Hoatzin. I mean, if you looked at that, you would think this is an ancient bird. It's got the claws on its wings and things like that.
Logicked?
So basically a wing with a clawed hand sticking out. You know, something like this juvenile what's seen. Except, of course, that the clawed hands would have kept sticking out of the wing into adulthood instead of developing into the typical blunt, clubby bird hands of the adult what's seen. Kent, if a wing with fingers sticking out is not half leg and half wing, then I don't know what is.
And, you know, what we need to do is we need to understand, hey, these birds were alive. They were created on the 5th day of creation. A lot of them have died in the flood. They've survived. They've died out since then. Yep. And, you know, it's not a big deal. It's actually easy for us to understand from a biblical viewpoint.
According to the Bible, birds and sea creatures were created on day 5, with land animals on day 6. And that's why there can be no compromise on whales evolving from land mammals or birds evolving from sauropods. No amount of interpretation reverses that order. They cannot have it.
The person that got your DVDs, they actually put, Dr. Person, I got all of your DVDs
Dr.
today.
Person.
Better than Dr. Lady, I suppose.
And then in the next one it says, I hate spell checker.
I can't wait for auto fact correct to be a thing.
Yeah, all right. Next one comes from phys.org. Killing flu viruses with the help from a frog. All right, Georgia, this is just awesome, isn't it?
All right, frog mucus, it turns out, can be beneficial for killing viruses. I saw this actually on the regular news this morning, and they were talking about you should kiss a frog. You know, like, kissing a frog isn't bad for you.
So what now? I reckon you want a kiss?
Kissing would be nice, yes?
Oh, poison dart frog!
I've sure earned this.
But basically what they found was a substance called a peptide, which is kind of like a short little protein in the frog mucus that's actually very effective against the flu virus. So this is good because viruses are really hard to develop substances against because they change so much.
But remember, that's not evolution.
It'll be antiviral milkshakes, the frog mucus milkshake.
Yeah,
the mucus malt.
Hey, it also shows you.
Oh, come on.
Sweetums eat frog now!
But who knows what other places there are out there in nature that God has allowed to exist that can be used to help fight disease.
Cool.
Well, that's right. Looking at plants, looking at animals. I mean, God has some incredible design in there. Yeah, which is that's good news for research. That's good research.
Time and time again on this news show, you three mock and belittle and bemoan scientific research. You're morally outraged or you think it's a waste of time. This is why your agenda needs to be fought against. Then, when science discovers something that doesn't defend you by some miracle, suddenly you're champions of it. Where are all the discoveries that we get by believing in creation? All the creation science advances? Nowhere. Nowhere.
The state of Missouri and this Lutheran school wanted to have the shredded tires on their playground because it's safer so if kids fall on it, they don't scrape their knee. And they were rejected by the state because they're a religious institution.
But the state offers it to other playgrounds.
Right. But the state has the Blaine Amendment that says you basically can't give money to any school that is sponsored by a religious organization.
You know, I give this lawsuit a great deal of success, I think, in the Supreme Court, because it's really a similar situation, in a way, to what happened in Kentucky with us at the Ark Encounter.
Yeah.
You had the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United, and so on, who were speaking against this. Americans United for Separation of Church and State wrote a letter to the governor, and then the governor said, no, because you're a religious organization, you said you're going to tell people about Jesus, you can't have this. So then we took the state of Kentucky to court, to federal court, and won a decisive victory.
No, Ken. Your case was over discriminatory hiring practices. The Ark Encounter is a for-profit organization, yet you wanted to be able to discriminate in hiring against anyone who didn't sign up for your statement of faith, including the sexual purity pledge. You wanted to be able to fire employees for having sex. While it's okay for not-for-profit religious organizations to discriminate on the basis of faith, it's not okay for for-profit businesses like yours. How you won this appeal is beyond me, though I think it says more about your state than about legality. Regardless, to pretend now that it was some kind of attempt to silence your message is just another example of outright lies that come out of your mouth. Too bad the 9th commandment to not lie is in Exodus and not in Genesis, then maybe you'd have read it.
The Supreme Court even put off hearing it until they had the 9th judge, because I think they knew it was going to be close.
Doesn't that make it obvious to everybody when you're talking about, you got a Supreme Court that's half on the right and half on the left and half conservative and half liberal, which means it's all to do with your worldview as to how you interpret the law and the Constitution, instead of seeing what the Constitution actually says.
Of course they dragged their feet until they could get a favorable judge lineup. The U.S. Supreme Court system is too mind-boggling and frustrating for this partially informed Canadian to get into here, but none of this is a surprise to anyone.
And what's funny is they openly state, they're more than happy to give it to secular causes.
Right.
Which, secular humanism, atheism, these are all religions. We've dealt with those sort of things.
Yeah,
but they're fine with that.
The secularists get on my Facebook and Twitter and all the time saying, we are not a religion. We are not they are a religion.
It's a set of beliefs.
You can keep saying that religion is as vague as a set of beliefs, but then you're going to have to include iPhone users and Android users as religious, which might be a good way for Apple stores to avoid paying taxes. They can call themselves a church. Are vegans religious? Green Bay Packers fans? Marijuana proponents? Coffee drinkers? People with favorite colors? The only definitions that matter here are the legal ones. Unfortunately, the U.S. courts haven't given a good definition of religion. The closest coming from the Supreme Court in 1890 in Davis v. Beeson. The term religion has reference to one's view of his relations to his creator, and the obligations they impose of reverence for his being and character and of obedience to his will. Atheism, humanism, all those things you want to paint as a religion, they do not have a creator. There is no deity. There is no one you are beholden to. It's not a religion. But when you base your life off an ancient book, anything you hear often enough becomes true, particularly from an authority figure. This is not lost on Ken.
If they're not religious, they shouldn't even be posting. I mean, they betray the fact that they're religious by saying that they're not religious.
Someone will have to explain to me how this makes a lick of sense. Saying I'm innocent isn't evidence that the innocent man is guilty, just because a guilty man would say the same thing. Lastly, I always find it a little delicious when Christians use the words like religious and faith as derogatory terms for non-believers, when they extol religion and faith as virtues for themselves. It's like they know these are not virtues.
All right, this next one comes from the New York Times. President Carter, am I a Christian? He was asking President Carter this, former president, how literally do you take the Bible, including miracles like the resurrection? What's the first thing he said?
It doesn't believe in six-day creation.
Yeah, really, that's what...
But he's inconsistent because he says, I accept the overall message of the Bible is true. He says he accepts the miracles in the New Testament, the virgin birth, and the resurrection. Well, if you have a scientific background, you shouldn't believe those things either.
You and I are agreeing all over the place today, Georgia.
When he says, I do not judge, he then says, the Bible said, Jesus said, judge not. But you got to take that in context.
That's right,
exactly.
yes.
Because the Bible doesn't say not to judge.
That's right. It's saying not to judge falsely.
Oh, Jesus wants you to judge, just not falsely. Righteous judgment is where we are at. Well, it's a good thing the Bible is so clear that all Christians of the world agree upon every point, so they can avoid these false judgments. It'd be awful if honest people disagreed about the interpretation of these details. One might end up judging falsely.
That's
well,
right.
when you tell somebody they're a sinner, you're judging.
That's
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Well,
You're judging them.
John 7:12 commands us to give a righteous judgment.
No, John 7:12 says nothing like that. It's almost like your audience doesn't know the Bible or science. Do you mean Romans chapter 2, verse 1? It's the only verse I can think of with the phrase righteous judgment. You, therefore, have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. No, that can't be it. That seems to be the opposite of your judgment crusade. Maybe get back to me on the verses where Jesus says to be judgy. They must be in there, though. It seems every Christian practices it.
President Carter said, I look on the contradictions among the gospel writers as a sign of authenticity.
Yeah. Well, that shocks me because there are no contradictions in the Bible.
Right.
And there you have it. Suck it, people who read. No contradictions. You heard it here. Why are we talking about this?
We actually have a book series. Volume 1 here is in red. Volume 2 is kind of a greenish yellow looking color here. Demolishing supposed Bible contradictions.
Oh, right. Gotta pay the bills.
You don't have to be absolutely brilliant to do this. You can look this stuff up, read it in context, and usually you can see your answer right there.
Ooh, are you talking about scientific research?
When people try to claim there's alleged contradictions.
No, should have known better.
We can't have the message without the messenger. When we quote Shakespeare, we say Shakespeare said. So when we quote Jesus, we need to be able to say Jesus says.
Right.
Is Ken aware that there's considerable doubt as to whether all the words attributed to Shakespeare were actually written by Shakespeare? Better examples next time, Ken.
But when somebody accepts evolution millions of years and starts denying parts of the Bible, what they're doing is they're grabbing another religion and they're bringing it over and they're trying to mix it with their Christianity. That's a form of syncretism. In the Old Testament, some of the godly Israelites started to say, let's take the Ashtoreths or the Baals and let's mix it with our godly worship.
Or when the Jews were conquered by the Babylonians in 600 BC under King Nebuchadnezzar II, the Babylonian creation story from the Enuma Elish was scrubbed for monotheism and became the brand new first chapter of the Torah that we have today, in the spirit of harmonizing the beliefs of the subjects and the rulers. Oh, you didn't know that today's Genesis 2 used to be the first chapter? Look it up.
Yeah, this next article comes from the New York Times, The Evangelical Roots of Our Post-Truth Society.
This author sees it as a good thing. Oh, it's a good thing that these colleges are now trying to get students to question the Bible.
Yeah, how can students learn things if they keep asking questions?
And when they say pseudoscientific, they're talking about people who believe in six literal days.
What? Someone called you pseudoscientific? Christians are calling you pseudoscientific? But you assured me that only people who wanted to reject God and be filthy sinners would deny your ideas. I'm confused.
And this is why people need to be so careful about where they send their young people to. Because just because it says Christian college, that can mean a lot of different things.
Now there's some righteous judgment. Good job, Georgia.
So we always recommend people go to our website, creationcolleges.org, for more information on where you can find colleges that really stand on the authority and truthfulness of God's Word.
Or use that as a handy guide for colleges to avoid. Either way, dual purpose.
People don't read our stuff, so they're criticizing us, and yet it's obvious they've never even read what we produce. So
don't worry, Georgia. I'm reading your stuff before I criticize you. I got you.
Prehistoric sea creature from 70 million years ago, found by elk hunter in Montana. And it was a lasmosaur,
Right.
Which is a larger.
And it was a short-necked
Well,
elasmosaur.
yeah, normally they're long-necked. They normally have about 76 vertebrae, but this one only had about 40. And yet it's found in the same sediments that the long-necked ones are. So they're like, oh, so the long-neck didn't evolve from the short.
Really? You're doing a second Why Are There Still Monkeys segment in the same half-hour show? Of course, the common ancestor species can still be alive at the same time as the descendant species. Your website already understands this and says to stop saying it.
By the way, happy anniversary, Bodie.
Yeah, it's happy.
Happy
Send some
anniversary.
emojis across
How many
hearts
years?
across to say
13
happy
years.
anniversary
13 years.
to Bodie.
Yep.
13, that's all.
13, yeah, it, feels,
You know,
it feels like millions of
For
years.
my wife
doesn't
and I.
Your wife's a lucky lady, Bodie.
it? This is Answers News signing off. God bless you.
Let's get started with today's Answers News.
But I already did it.
I don't know what that was. I wasn't here for that. I didn't watch this one live. I've sinned again.
Now we're done here.
Jesus Christ, man. It's fucking bullshit.
All right. Please like and subscribe. See you next time. Later.